I published my annual report in August. I publish a report every year about the health and ill health that we have here in Tayside. So this year's report focused on the impact of poverty and the health inequalities that result from poverty in Tayside. And a whole chapter within my report was about welfare reform, the damage that welfare reform is doing to people's health, particularly the most vulnerable and the poorest sections of our society here in Tayside and more widely across Scotland. And it's very clear that the most vulnerable people are being damaged by welfare reform, and recent evidence from academic studies that have been done are showing that there's very little benefit coming out in terms of improved employment or any of the supposed benefits of welfare reform. We're not seeing these. So that's a major concern. We already have very significant health inequalities in Tayside, and this is just making things even worse.
Well, I think the general perception is that people who are in work are not suffering financially at all, and the findings certainly are there's a lot of people who are on low wages who need to claim benefits, working tax credits, and they're being changed, which is making things even more difficult for people. And 0-hour contracts puts people in an almost impossible situation because frequently they're not able to take any alternative work, and they're left with basically no money coming in at any given moment of time because they're not required to work that particular week. Well, on a day-to-day basis, I mean, you can't plan ahead. I mean, you can't manage on the little or no money. It's having an adverse effect on people's ability just to feed themselves, to supply heating in the winter time, and quite frequently people are faced with a stark choice of heating or eating. Whereas it looks like if somebody's in work, you think they should be, I would imagine generally people will expect them to be able to manage financially, but being in work is not actually necessarily being out of poverty. There is a lot of in-work poverty.
Well, there's a trade union movement. I'm on the General Council of the Scottish TUC, so we're very conscious of it and the different attempts to try and change things. Obviously, trade unions have for generations been involved in trying to improve people's pay and conditions, but particularly in the public sector and particularly in areas like hospitality and caring, wages are at horrendous levels and people are stuck. There's not much progression, certainly not for women, out of these jobs. If you're in a low-paid job, there's a chance 10 years later you'll still be in a low-paid job. I mean, we obviously feel that as trade unions, we've always been part of that attempt to try and raise people's living standards, to increase wages. But I think people are aware of the increasing difficulties that trade unions have with legislation and other issues. Our hands are tied in ways they haven't been tied for many years, and with the trade union bill going through Parliament, it's going to get a whole lot worse.
So the Poverty Alliance is the national anti-poverty network in Scotland. We've been doing a lot of work over many years now on both the living wage and on issues around attitudes to poverty. So we have two campaigns that we're running. We have the Scottish Living Wage campaign. We also have something called Stick Your Labels, which is our newest campaign, which is trying to address some of the negative attitudes that are around about people who are living on low incomes. With the living wage, that's really taken off. There are hundreds of employers across Scotland who are paying the living wage, and it's really one of those campaigns that's captured the imagination and people are really getting behind it. And I think it will be the same with the Stick Your Labels campaign. Well, we have over 300 employers now who've signed up to be officially accredited living wage employers. I think the campaign goes much wider than that. We're supporting a series of community-based responses to living wage, series of community-based campaigns. And I think what we're seeing is on the part of low-paid workers wanting to get involved in the campaign, but also employers who know it's the right thing to do, wanting to sign up and get recognition for paying the living wage. And it is having an impact on people's incomes. We know that the living wage makes a real difference to people when they're getting by, when they're in work poverty, as we call it.
I'd like to see the issue of the living wage kept very prominent I think Dundee as a city is investing heavily in the waterfront development, and it would be a shame to see those living in and around Dundee who are looking to jobs and looking for employment out of the waterfront development to end up in low-paid jobs with employers who've been encouraged to come here and have actually been built facilities from a wonderful vantage point next to the V&A. The investment in that to create these facilities, it would be disappointing, to say the least, if young people, particularly in Dundee, didn't get the opportunity for more than just low-paid minimum wage jobs.
The Fairness Commission needs to try and look at ways that can alleviate that within Dundee. We've heard evidence from Child Poverty Action Group about the extra costs of activities in school, how that can impact adversely on particularly low-income families, people in poverty. So an integrated approach through all the agencies, be the statutory or voluntary sector agencies, to try and alleviate the effects of poverty that we can't change on a national level because of the benefits structure or because of employers paying people low wages or zero-hour contracts. So it's trying to think laterally about how, as a city, Dundee can make things fairer for people and make sort of inclusion into normal activities, social inclusion and financial inclusion where possible.
I suppose we're looking at two areas. We're looking at in-work poverty and we're looking at stigma and discrimination towards people on low incomes. So I think one of the key things that we see needs to be done around in-work poverty is to raise people's wages. It seems fairly obvious. At the moment, the powers to do that at local level are really very limited. So we need to get people to pay higher wages on a voluntary basis. And so we think the living wage is one way to do that. And we've got a very large-scale campaign that we're happy to come up to Dundee and work out ways to engage with more employers locally and to have them pay the living wage. So that would be one thing, to find new ways to engage in living wage campaign in Dundee. And the other one is to look at, well, what can we do practically to start shifting attitudes, and that might mean training for all of the public sector staff in Dundee around issues to do with negative attitudes to people in poverty. It might mean running seminars to raise awareness or engaging with the local media. So there's a lot of things that can be done, and one of the things we hope to do tonight is to discuss what some of the specific recommendations could be for the Commission.